You texted her 3 times in a row. No response. So you sent a fourth message explaining why you texted 3 times. She read all 4. And then, nothing. That woman who was literally calling you twice a day last week suddenly went cold. And you're sitting there completely confused, wondering what switched. Here's the brutal truth. Nothing switched in her. Something switched in you. And she felt it before you even noticed it yourself. This channel, Brutal Relationships, exists because most men are getting advice that sounds good but destroys attraction in real time. We'd rather give you the uncomfortable truth than comfortable lies. Now, I want to be crystal clear before we get into this. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about playing games. What we're actually talking about is emotional discipline, the ability to manage what you project so that the relationship dynamic stays healthy, charged, and real. Because here's what most men don't understand. Attraction isn't just about what you say or how you look. It's about the energy you consistently broadcast. And certain things, when revealed too early or too carelessly, short-circuit that energy completely. So, let's get into it. Thing 1, your level of investment. Picture this. Marcus meets a woman named Simone at a friend's birthday dinner. The chemistry is instant. They talk for 3 hours straight. He gets her number, she texts him first the next morning, and by day 4, they're already making plans for the weekend. Marcus is excited, genuinely excited, and he shows it. He tells his boys she might be the one. He rearranges his gym schedule to make time for her. He starts responding to her texts within seconds every single time. He cancels a business call to take her to brunch. And then, around week 3, Simone starts pulling back. She takes longer to respond. She seems slightly less enthusiastic. Marcus doubles down. More effort, more gestures, more availability. And within a month, she's gone. Here's the thing. Simone didn't leave because Marcus was a bad guy. She left because Marcus handed her the entire game before it even started. He showed her his full hand on day 1. The psychological principle at play here is called effort justification. People assign more value to things they've had to work for, not because they're cruel, but because the human brain is wired to protect its energy investments. When something comes easily, the subconscious mind quietly whispers, "If I got this so easily, how special can it actually be?" So, what do? You don't pretend to be uninterested. That's fake, and she'll see through it immediately. Instead, you stay genuinely engaged in your own life. You respond when it makes sense to respond. You make plans when you actually want to make plans. You let the investment grow naturally, on both sides, at a pace that feels earned. Your level of excitement should track with the actual depth of the connection, not just the potential of it. Thing 2, your emotional spiral. After conflict. Here's what nobody talks about. 2 people get into a small argument, the kind where one person said something slightly thoughtless, the other got hurt. And now there's tension in the air. Normal stuff. Happens in every relationship. But here's where the average man completely loses the plot. The argument ends. She goes quiet for a few hours to process, and he starts spiraling internally. Did I mess up? Is she going to leave? Should I apologize again? Should I call? What if she's pulling away? And then, crucially, he lets all of that spiral out. He texts her an emotional paragraph about his fears. He brings it up again when she seemed like she was already over it. He keeps poking the wound because his anxiety needs resolution right now. Think about this. What did she actually see in that moment? She saw a man who cannot self-regulate. A man who needs her to manage his emotional state. And there is nothing that erodes attraction faster than a woman realizing she's become your emotional support system before she's even your girlfriend. Now, let me be clear, emotional openness in a relationship is beautiful and necessary. But emotional dumping early on, or emotional spiraling after minor friction, is a different thing entirely. One is intimacy. The other is dependency. The psychological framework here is called emotional self-efficacy, your ability to process your own feelings without immediately outsourcing them. High self-efficacy is deeply attractive because it signals security. It signals that you are a man who can handle hard things. And here's where it gets interesting. Women don't actually want a man who never feels anything. They want a man who feels deeply but doesn't collapse under the weight of those feelings. So, what do? When you feel that spiral starting after conflict, you sit with it. You go for a walk, you call a friend, you journal it out. You wait until you're regulated before you continue the conversation. Not because you're hiding your feelings, but because you're taking responsibility for managing them yourself first. Thing 3, the full scope of your approval. Seeking. Let me paint you a picture. David starts dating a woman named Priya. She mentions offhand that she likes jazz. By the following week, David is sending her Spotify playlists, telling her jazz is actually his favorite genre too, even though 3 weeks ago he told his roommate that jazz was boring. Priya mentions she's into hiking. David starts talking about how much he loves the outdoors, even though his idea of outdoor activity has historically been sitting on his apartment balcony. Now, David isn't lying out of malice. He's approval-seeking. He's shape-shifting into whoever he thinks she wants him to be. And here's the painful irony. Women can feel this. They might not be able to name it immediately, but somewhere in the gut, something registers as hollow, like she's not actually talking to a person. She's talking to a mirror that reflects her preferences back at her. Here's what most people miss. Women are biologically wired to detect authenticity. It's an evolutionary thing. Being able to read whether someone is genuinely themselves or performing for social approval is a survival skill. So, when a man is constantly gauging her reactions before forming his own opinion, constantly adjusting his personality based on her cues, she starts to feel like there's no real ground to stand on. And you cannot build attraction on shifting sand. The version of yourself that disagrees with her sometimes, that has opinions she didn't expect, that pushes back on something she said with genuine confidence, that version is far more magnetic than the version that agrees with everything she says just to keep the peace. So, what do? Notice where you're editing yourself to seek approval. Notice where you're softening a real opinion because you're afraid of her reaction. Practice holding your own perspective in low-stakes moments, not aggressively, but with calm conviction. Say, I actually see that differently, and then explain why. That's not conflict. That's character. And character is what she's actually attracted to. Thing 4, your fear of losing her. This one is the deepest one, and it might be the most important. At some point in almost every relationship that starts with strong chemistry, a fear shows up. The fear of losing her. And once that fear arrives uninvited, it starts running the show from behind the curtain. You know exactly what I'm talking about. She posts a picture, and some guy comments on it. You suddenly feel a tightness in your chest. She mentions an ex casually in conversation. You spend the next 2 hours replaying the sentence trying to decode what it means. She takes 6 hours to respond to a message that you sent 3 minutes after she last texted you, and now you're doing math in your head about her reply times. Fear of loss triggers a very specific behavioral pattern, clinginess disguised as affection, extra check-ins that feel like surveillance, compliments that are actually requests for reassurance, plans that are actually attempts to control access. And the devastating thing is, the more you act from this fear, the more you accelerate the very outcome you're trying to prevent. Let that sink in. The fear of losing her, when you act on it, is one of the most effective ways of actually losing her. Here's the psychological mechanism. When you operate from scarcity, from the belief that she is the source of your happiness and that losing her would devastate you, your entire behavioral energy shifts. You become reactive. You become slightly desperate. You need the relationship to go well because your internal stability depends on it. And that need creates pressure. And sustained pressure in early or mid-stage relationships kills attraction reliably. Contrast that with a man who genuinely enjoys a woman's company, who is genuinely invested in the relationship, but who also knows deep in his bones that he will be okay no matter what happens. That man is relaxed. He's present. He doesn't flinch when she tests boundaries. He doesn't implode when she needs space. He doesn't need her to constantly reassure him that everything is fine. And that groundedness, that is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess. So, what do? First, you stop treating any single woman as irreplaceable before she's actually earned that status in your life. Second, you invest in yourself and your life so aggressively that you always have something to come home to beyond the relationship. your purpose, your friendships, your growth. Third, when you feel that fear creeping in, you name it privately. I'm feeling fear of loss right now. Naming it gives you distance from it. Distance means you can choose your behavior instead of reacting. Again from anxiety. Thing 5, the absence of mystery. In your daily life. Here's the last piece, and it's one most men completely overlook because it seems too simple to matter. When you first met her, you had a life she didn't know yet. There were stories she hadn't heard, layers she hadn't seen, opinions she hadn't discovered, friends and experiences she was curious about. And that unknown territory was part of the magnetic pull. Then, slowly, you gave her access to everything, every thought, every plan, every mood. You texted her throughout the day so she always knew exactly what you were doing. You answered every question about your past before she even finished asking. You talked about your feelings, your fears, your childhood, your dreams. All of it in the first 2 months. And before long, she had a complete map of you. Think about this. When you already know the ending of a book, what happens to your motivation to keep reading? This isn't about being secretive or playing games. Mystery isn't deception. Mystery is depth. It's the natural result of a man who is genuinely living a full, interesting life that doesn't revolve around any one relationship. Here's where it gets interesting. Most men accidentally kill mystery not out of bad intentions, but out of anxiety. They overshare because silence feels dangerous. They explain themselves constantly because they're worried she'll misunderstand. They check in repeatedly because they don't trust the connection to survive a gap in communication. Every single one of those behaviors collapses the natural intrigue that keeps attraction alive. The man who comes to dinner with energy from his own day, energy she wasn't part of, is more interesting than the man who spent the whole day managing the relationship in his head. The man who has friends she hasn't met, goals she doesn't fully understand yet, a sense of humor that still surprises her. That man is a world worth exploring. And attraction, at its core, is the desire to explore something you haven't fully figured out yet. So what do? Protect your world. Keep investing in the things that make you interesting before she came around. Don't narrate your entire life through the relationship lens. Let there be some things she finds out about you slowly, naturally, over time. Let there be silence that she has to sit with. Let her wonder sometimes what you're thinking. Not because you're withholding, but because you actually have a rich enough interior life that it doesn't all come out in one conversation. Here's the pattern underneath all 5 of these things. Every single one of them is rooted in the same core principle: self-possession. A man who is self-possessed controls his level of visible investment so that it matches the actual depth of the connection. He manages his emotional state so he doesn't outsource his anxiety to the people around him. He knows who he is clearly enough that he doesn't need to shapeshift for approval. He has a life full enough that losing one relationship, no matter how good it is, wouldn't hollow him out completely. And he maintains enough depth and engagement with his own world that he remains interesting to the people who choose to be close to him. None of this requires manipulation. None of this requires playing games. What it requires is the disciplined, daily work of becoming a man whose inner life is solid enough that you don't need constant external validation to function. Here's the thing about attraction. It's not primarily about tactics. It's about the signal your entire being broadcasts. And when a woman is around a man who is genuinely grounded, genuinely self-possessed, and genuinely living a full life that she gets to be a part of rather than the center of, that signal comes through loud and clear, without any tricks, without any scripts. Because in the end, the most magnetic version of you isn't the version trying to be attractive. It's the version that's so invested in becoming something real and worthwhile that attraction is almost a side effect. That's the standard worth chasing. And once you start chasing it, everything changes.